Washington Journal continues.
We're back with Congressman Jan Schakowsky, a Chief Deputy Whip, Democrat of Illinois, and also former Deficit Commission member. Congresswoman, Speaker Boehner put out his own plan. Your colleague in the Senate, Harry Reid, put out his own plan. What do you think first about the Democrats, what Harry Reid wants to do? Could you vote yes for that if it were up to come up for a vote in the House?
Well, let me say, Greta, first of all, we have got to address what is the real crisis right now. So we have to come to some agreement, because the real crisis is that if we allow our country to go into default, to not pay our bills, the consequences, despite what some may say on the Republican side, are catastrophic. The full faith and credit of the United States of America is something that the world economy really depends on. And we would see for ordinary Americans just devastating consequences if we don't do this. So we could do this in 5 minutes. We could just pass an increase in the debt ceiling. But instead, what some are saying is, well, we're willing to risk the default, and instead of borrowing money in order to pay our bills, let's remember, this is not about allowing for more spending. This is about, are we going to pay our bills? We're going to say, well, no, we're not going to borrow more money from people who want to lend it to us. We're going to borrow it from senior citizens because we're not going to send out those checks. We're going to borrow it from the military families, and we're going to borrow it from veterans. Essentially, that's what we're doing, transferring the borrowing to people that we owe money to. So, you asked about Harry Reid's plan. I would much rather see a plan that says that we're going to ask millionaires and billionaires to pay a bit more. But here's the good thing about Harry Reid's plan, which does cut $2.7 trillion over time from our spending. All about spending. But it doesn't cut Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid that so many families depend on. And it does raise that debt ceiling, avoiding a default crisis, until, for a reasonable amount of time. Unlike the Boehner plan, which keeps us in perpetual chaos here, wondering whether or not in 6 months the United States is going to pay its bills, and could result in a lowering of our credit rating.
If you take a look at Harry Reid's plan, though, about $1 trillion in savings would come from winding down the 2 wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Our last guest, Congressman Dan Burton, said that's already been the assumption all along. Those are not new savings. $1 trillion in winding down the wars is not new savings that the Senate Majority Leader Reid has identified.
Yes, it is new savings. I mean, we talk about what is the baseline budget, what is the real budget. Right now, we are spending that money. If we cut back on the, as is planned, on the war in Iraq, and I'd like to see a quicker withdrawal from Afghanistan, those are real dollars that are being spent right now. And so, this overseas contingency fund, the perpetual wars that we've been in for a long time, cutting back on those, in fact, would save the money. I want to tell you, this kind of fancy calculating and yours isn't real, ours isn't real, this is money we're spending now, and then money we won't be spending. It's real savings.
As we noted, you're a Chief Deputy Whip for, you count votes for the leadership.
That's right.
This is a quote from Raul Grijalva, your colleague, Democrat of Arizona, in the paper yesterday in the Washington Post. He said, there's an assumption that at the end we have to go along. I think that is a political miscalculation on the part of the White House. He said, I hope there's not a litmus test. Are you for the president or not? Do you think that the Progressive Caucus is behind the president?
Oh, absolutely. And I saw that Keith Ellison, who was the co-chair of the Progressive Caucus on television last night, the president is trying to, and did say to the American people, we have to stop the recklessness. We have to stop the irrationality that's going on right now. And we have to act responsibly to say, yes, we're going to pay our bills, and we also recognize that we need to get our economic house in order. And so yes, the Progressive Caucus is there.
If you take a look at the two different plans, Boehner's plan and Reed's plan,
Okay.
and this is
Yeah,
the Washington Post. They have a side-by-side in the paper this morning. There are some similarities between the two. 1.2 trillion in discretionary spending cuts. They do go about it in different ways. A bipartisan committee to take a look at this and recommend further cuts. But obviously, Boehner's, as we all know, is a two-step process versus Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's, which would take you past the election. Where is there compromise when you take a look at these two?
I think the two-step process does exactly what the business community doesn't want and what the American people don't want. What Boehner named his plan the two-step approach to hold President Obama accountable. What I see there is this targeting of the president. That is, that the main goal is political, to keep the president, making sure that he's always going to be responding to John Boehner. Well, of course the president is responding to the Congress. The Congress has to appropriate the money. So of course we are. And the president over and over has said he was willing to go along. He was willing to make difficult cuts. Making a two-step process, saying in 6 months we have to come back and do the same thing, means that we are going to be in this era of uncertainty. Uncertainty for the markets, uncertainty for American families. Is this the time that people can invest in the United States of America? Should businesses be hiring right now? Or are we going to get ourselves in it? So it's the two steps, I think, that are the significant difference here.
The New York Times says that House Democrats are likely to solidly line up against the Boehner proposal. You know where the votes are. Do you think you'll lose any Democrats that, from your side? Will they vote? Will any one of them vote yes?
I think all but, there may be one or two. And Boehner likes to say, when one or two Democrats go to the other side, he likes to say it's bipartisan, like the cut, cap, and balance proposal, which Democrats soundly rejected. Only 5 Democrats voted for it, 9 Republicans voted against it. Not a bipartisan plan. So the Democrats are going to vote against the Boehner plan. It is a cynical plan. It has changed the goalpost. It says if the Congress doesn't do what the Commission says it's going to do, the debt ceiling cannot go up ever. So it's very harsh. It's not reasonable. So we're going to vote. We're going to vote no. I'm not sure that John Boehner has the votes. I think there are a number of people in his caucus that, regardless of the formulation, aren't going to vote to raise that debt ceiling.
Do you see compromise then? It sounds like you don't see a way for the two sides to come together.
John Boehner originally agreed to $800 billion in revenue increases. Eric Cantor just last month said he did not want to see a two-step, little by little, raising the debt limit. It's hard to deal with a moving target here. It's hard to negotiate when the negotiating demands keep changing. Having said that, I think the consequences are so grave if we let this August 2nd deadline go that I've got to believe that somehow or other we're going to be able to do that. Look, on the larger question of how we're going to deal with what I think are the crises, jobs, income inequality, the debt, because I was, as you mentioned, on the debt commission, the Simpson-Bowles commission. I agree we need to do it that long term. Of course we can do that. Can we do it by August 2nd? Not so sure. But as I said, in 5 minutes we could all come together and say, okay, let's avoid this default crisis, and then let's immediately sit down and figure out the rest.
But the credit rating agencies have said that won't be sufficient. Just raising the debt ceiling won't be enough. They want to see a credible plan for deficit reduction.
And we're willing to do that. And we're willing to do that, if not in the next 5 days, then in the next couple of weeks. I think people would be willing to stay through August and make that happen. But we have a very sure, or we're willing to stay 24 hours a day to try and figure this out. I'm hoping the pressure that Wall Street, that Americans, that the world economy, that'll be enough to get us to the compromise position.
Both the Senate Democrats and the House Republicans in these proposals for a path forward include a super committee, another deficit panel made up of bipartisan people to take a look at further recommendations. You served on the Deficit Commission. People in Washington, Politico said, are rolling their eyes at another committee. What do you think about the prospects of having another committee take a look at this?
You know, as you say, I was on a bipartisan debt commission appointed by the president. The difference here, these, as I understand it, would all be members of Congress, 6 from each party, 3 House Democrats, etc. You know, it'd be a mix, evenly matched. The question is, is that going to make more progress than, you know, we saw a gang of 6, a gang of 5, a gang of 8 coming up with a plan. I'm not so sure about that, but we're willing to do it. If this is what the Republicans require in order to make it happen, and that's my point, that we have moved, we have done so many things that they want to deal with the debt. And I'll tell you, one thing I was really happy about that the president did, he reminded people how we got here. The Republicans like to say, oh, most of this huge debt that we have right now is due to President Obama. Absolutely not true. Most of that is due to unpaid for tax cuts that went to the rich during the Bush administration, the unpaid for wars, and then, of course, a huge recession.
Caller's waiting to talk to you,
Sure.
but I want to get you on the record real fast before we go to calls about Congressman David Wu. He said that he will not run again, but do you think that he should step down?
Well, Nancy Pelosi has asked for an ethics panel investigation. You know, I am very reluctant to declare someone guilty before having an investigation to find out what's going on. I don't know that he's even ruled that out, that he would resign. But you know, I really don't know any of the details about this. But he has said he isn't going to run again.
And according to his office, he is thinking about his political future and whether or not he stays on the job currently. But as you said, he does not plan to run again.
Right.
Let's go to Lawrence, who's a Republican, Idaho Falls. Thanks for waiting. Lawrence, you're on the air with Jan Schakowsky.
Awesome. First of all, let me say it's a pleasure to be able to talk to a representative. This is awesome. A couple comments that I just wanted to make. I don't like how Republicans or Democrats, they always like to accuse the president that it's their fault for the the deficit, the debt ceiling being raised, but it's not, because Congress has the power of the purse. And the other issue is, if they really wanted to fix the deficit, they could. The $14.294 trillion would be easy to pay off. All they'd have to do is basically, we got all kinds of natural resources here. We got, natural gas. We're like the Saudi Arabia's natural gas. We got oil. It would be easy. We could probably pay off our national deficit, the whole thing, within a matter of years. But no one's bringing this up. No one's bringing it to the table because we're greedy. We're greedy Americans. We like energy. We like oil.
So you're saying because we're spending $1 billion a day for foreign oil, that if we stop doing that, that we would certainly have more money. I don't disagree that I don't know that it would pay off everything, but I certainly think that we need to look at domestic sources. But that's not only our oil and gas, but we have the capacity and the creativity to use more electric cars, to use alternative energies like solar and thermal and wind, and that are ready to go. If we were to actually produce things right here, you may not know, but we have invented a lot of the technologies, and yet when the stuff actually gets made, like batteries that can go into electric cars, where do you think we buy them from? China. Makes no sense at all. So the energy is draining a lot of money from our economy, and I agree that that's part of the solution.
Here's a tweet from Jocelyn Cross. She asked this: please answer one question. Do we have the money to pay our debts, or don't we? Probably referring to the headline that many are seeing in the newspapers this morning. The debt ceiling deadline may be more fluid. The paper noting this morning that August 2nd may not be the deadline, that the government may be able to pay its bills for about a week longer than August 2nd.
Well, I don't know what a difference a real week makes here. Again, this would, I think, if we pass that deadline, we would see we could see an increase in the interest rates that would affect all Americans and certainly affect our federal budget. The answer basically is no. And what Lawrence said when he called is that it is Congress that has set those spending limits and appropriated the money. And so these are bills that we've got in our stack, just like they have it up. These are bills that need to be paid. Is it August 2nd? Or, my understanding is absolutely it is, that's the date. And no, we don't have the money right now to pay those bills.
We'll hear from Tracy, Democratic caller in Luna Pier, Michigan.
Morning, how are you?
Morning, Tracy.
Just a few comments. I just wanted to say that I'm amazed that the debt ceiling is even an issue, and I blame the Republican and Tea Party people for that. It was raised 7 times under George Bush. Nobody said a word about it. And now all of a sudden it's a big problem. We do have a revenue problem. It's not just a spending problem. The wealthy do not pay a fair share in their taxes when they have loopholes and deductions that they can declare that normal people just can't do. The people in Washington are playing games. I am personally tired of it. You've got my life in your hands, and that's not fair. So I don't mean to take this out on you, Mr. Schakowsky. If you had seen me dialing my redial number during the first guest, I was going to let him have it. So as for you, you have a nice day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I couldn't agree more that not only was it raised actually 8 times under George Bush, but 18 times under Ronald Reagan, who made a very stern warning to the Congress that they better not play games with the debt ceiling just to raise it. We're the only country in the world that doesn't do it on an automatic basis. And now for the Republicans to hold people hostage, I want to also agree with another point of yours. A man named John Paulson brought in a hedge fund manager. $5 billion was his income last year. He doesn't pay the same rate that you do on your taxes. When you have capital gains and hedge fund managers are allowed to pay, by and large, at 15%. This is an outrage, and if Americans feel offended by the fact that nowhere in the Republican proposals is there anything that cuts one hair off the head of a millionaire and billionaire while asking seniors and veterans and our military to bear the brunt, I think that is so not only unfair, it's un-American.
Then
I agree with you.
Then, Congresswoman, do you oppose Harry Reid's proposal, also no tax increases?
You know what? We have to get through this. We're going to have to, I think, be adults here and say, we're gonna raise the debt ceiling, and we're going to do something more reasonable than what the Republicans have proposed to get there. I will support that. And then continue to hammer away at why we are not asking the wealthiest Americans in this country, who have sucked up all of the increase in all the growth that we have seen in the country over the last couple of decades, have gone to the rich. The crisis we have right now is that the middle class is disappearing.
In retrospect, Congresswoman, the proposal put forward by the Deficit Commission, as a former member, do you think that maybe there should have been more of a push for that from the administration, given where we're at now?
You know, one of the things I wish he would have highlighted.
I know you voted no against.
I voted no, but I offered my own plan to cut actually even more than the Simpson Bowles, to cut the deficit even more. I had more from revenues and from different sources of cuts in spending, but I did balance that budget. But a little known fact about Simpson-Bowles is that it began by saying, in order not to damage the fragile recovery, cuts should not happen until 2013. That was in Simpson-Bowles. Then they had a recommendation for cuts that I didn't like, cutting Social Security benefits, shifting costs to seniors under Medicare, which I don't think we need to do. So there were a number of things I didn't, but that was, I think, a salient point here, that if we, somehow this myth that if we cut now, that's going to create more jobs, that's exactly the opposite.
Kenosha, Wisconsin. John, independent.
Yes, hi. I wonder why everybody's so, the Democrats especially, are so concerned about getting us through the next election. It seems to me, with being the most important problem our country has, that it should be a referendum on the next election. Let the people decide who they want. Instead, no, let's put it off so it won't interfere. Well, come on, let's make it the main issue in the next election.
Okay, so John, what do you want to happen?
Well, I would like to see the budget, the deficit lifted by, say, $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion, and then, of course, we'll be in trouble next summer, right? That's fine. Let's get it solved by an election. All I hear now is demagoguery. Everybody blaming everybody else.
John, let me jump in, because you're thinking then the pressure of the 2012 election will bring the two sides together.
No, what you're saying is essentially the Boehner two-step plan, right?
Well, I guess that'd be what I'm closest to, but I do think it should be a national issue. We just shovel all this stuff under the rug, and the pile of dirt's getting so high now nobody can climb it. And it's time we have to face real problems here. And it's not going to bother me if they tax the rich more. It's not going to bother me, even though I'm on Social Security and highly reliant on it. If it's so necessary for the country to cut my pay by 10%, my Social Security check, that's fine.
All right, Congresswoman.
Well, first of all, it's not about the next election that we're trying to raise the debt ceiling for a reasonable amount of time. This is to provide a certain amount of certainty to our economic situation. We've never done that step by step, little by little, conditioning raising the debt ceiling. We have always said the United States of America pays its bills. And, there's no evidence whatsoever that the Democrats are not willing to sit down to balance the budget. There's such a short-term memory here in our country. It's just a little over a decade ago that we handed George W. Bush not only a balanced budget, but a surplus. We have a history of fiscal responsibility, of making sure that we do make our income and our expenditures in line. And so there's no reluctance on the part of the Democrats to sit down and work out a plan. But you can't keep changing the goalposts, and you can't renege on your debt. So this is not about the next election. This is about providing some measure of certainty, not just 6 months and the knowledge that we're going to go through this whole crisis again. No.
Gary Duncan tweets in, please defend Obama's vote against raising the debt ceiling when he sat in the Senate. What has changed? What has
changed? The change is that occasionally people have voted against raising the debt ceiling on both sides of the aisle, but no one has ever stood there to obstruct the actual raising of that debt ceiling, have expressed their opinion not to do it. Barack Obama saying that we should not engage in the war in Iraq and spend up to $1 trillion in that war. I get it. I understand saying that this is not a legitimate expense, but did Barack Obama organize enough Democrats to say, and as a consequence, we're just not going to pay for that. We're not going to pay for our men and women in the military. No, he did not. He expressed an opinion. And so have Republicans expressed opinions. John Boehner and Eric Cantor did not always vote to raise the debt ceiling, and many members have, but they didn't obstruct at the time.
Theda, Republican in Asheville, North Carolina. You're next for the Congresswoman.
Yes, good morning. I want to continue on a little bit of what's been talked about, and I think after watching all that's been going on, the one referendum we need is term limits. I think people should be able to serve 2 terms, go home, go back to work, and we pay no more money. Has anybody ever figured out how much money we're paying people who have served in Congress who are no longer there? And since this president went in office until November, the election, the Democrats had total rule. Everything came to the floor under a closed rule, and they totally got everything they wanted. They crammed it down our throats, the Obamacare, and that's one reason that we have a Tea Party.
All right, let's get a response from the Congresswoman.
Well, on the question of term limits, here's the problem. I think, it's an idea that seems attractive to a lot of people. If you have people, you said 2 terms, who serve only for 4 years, there's in Washington also a kind of permanent group of people outside the Congress called lobbyists, who actually have a lot of institutional memory. They've been here a long time. They have more expertise. They know, because 4 years is not really a long time to know how the system works. My fear is it would be those people and the permanent staff people who would actually then be running the country, and not so much the people that get elected for such a short period of time. And I think it would work to the detriment of your goals as well as mine.
Democratic line, Deanna, Spokane, Washington.
Yes, good morning. I have a comment about the military. I don't quite understand how the representatives in Washington can even consider to cut the military. And I'm not just talking about active military, I'm talking about retired or disabled military. Our men and women in our armed forces have gone out and they have served our country proudly. They have given up, their families have given up, and now when we depend on this and we depend on the help from our disability checks or from the military checks, they're talking about cutting the military checks. Well, they've served our country, they've protected us and kept us safe. Why? Why would the people in Washington who we elect do this to our military? I don't quite understand that.
I agree with you. One of the reasons I voted against the Simpson-Bowles debt reduction plan is that on the military cuts, and I think we do have a bloated military, but they took it out on a lot of our active military, on the health care plans, on the veterans and the long-term care health care plans for the veterans. And I do think that that's not where we need to go. People who serve in the military do it out of patriotism to the country, not because they want to get rich. They're not going to get rich in the military, and that's not the place that we need to go. And if we were to default on paying our bills, some of the checks that won't go out would in fact be to military families, to veterans, as well as to Social Security recipients. And that is just unconscionable. To play a hostage game with those checks. 70 million checks go out every month. Those checks are in danger of not going out. I agree with you.
Molly, independent caller in Charleston, West Virginia.
Hello. I've just been listening to certain things that have been going on, and I think that, for one, we need to shut down NAFTA, period, because that's where all of our money is going to, is overseas. If we lower the taxes and maybe have the business to come back over into America, then that is going to help as well, and maybe give them a tax break instead of sending all of our companies in China or wherever else, and get some of that back. And Reagan had us out of debt in the 80s, and I don't think, if we can't pay our debt now, why raise the debt ceiling? We're going to have to maybe cut out maybe some of these laboratories that are inspecting like insects and different things like that. Because
different earmarks. That was Molly in Charleston, West Virginia. Congresswoman?
Well, she was talking about jobs going overseas, and as someone who opposed NAFTA originally, I wasn't in the Congress, but I agree with her on some of these trade agreements. But you may not know that we still give tax breaks to corporations who outsource our American jobs overseas. One of the things that the Democrats have proposed wouldn't that be a reasonable tax break to get rid of? To say, no, you're not going to benefit from actually sending our jobs overseas. That's one of the, I think, sacred cows of the Republican Party. They say, no, we don't want to cut that tax break from corporations that send our jobs overseas. So, essentially, I agree that a number of our trade agreements actually favor multinational corporations and not the American worker. And of course, cutting waste from we don't want to spend money on things that aren't useful. And there's plenty of waste that we want to cut. So on that front, I think Republicans and Democrats agree. Wasteful spending, we should get rid of it.
Carol is watching us in York, Pennsylvania, a Republican.
Yes. I'm a veteran, and I'm also on Social Security. And I am very disappointed with both the Democrats and the Republicans because they're acting like children. It's I want, but they don't care about the people. Now, it's the people that put them in office. We need to get our act together. And I agree, too, that these jobs need to come back. I mean, China actually owns us because of the debt.
Well, I understand what you're saying and completely do sympathize. I mean, that is not true that all members of Congress don't understand what ordinary people are feeling. We go home on the weekend. We go to the grocery store. An elderly couple came up to me last weekend at the grocery store and asked me how we could help them apply for food stamps for the SNAP program. So, and I've been to foreclosure workshops where I see the American dream slipping through people's fingers. And we do have to respond to that. And you said not act like children, act like grown-ups. And so we have to pay our bills. Yes, we have to lower that deficit, but we have to do it in a fair and balanced way, making the rich who are getting richer and richer and richer pay their fair share and make sure that programs that you depend on, like veterans benefits, like Social Security, are not on the chopping block, because I know those are so important to you and millions of other Americans.
Here's a tweet from Tim Hounstein who says, please ask the Congresswoman why they, the Democrats, did not pass the budget while they were in power. And it's a point brought up by Republicans repeatedly that Senate Democrats, House Democrats, when you were in power, have not passed a budget on its own. Was that a mistake?
Well, actually, and not passing a budget is true of both parties. I'm in my 7th term now, and I can't remember how many weren't passed, but a lot of times we never had a budget. What we have are actual appropriations that we do. Those are passed. And so we, acknowledge the things that we need to do, and we appropriate money to do it. An overall budget, but the budget that was passed by the Republicans in the House of Representatives is so devastating and absolutely balances the budget off the backs of older Americans and people who are most vulnerable, and ends Medicaid. There's no question about it. They try and say they're trying to protect Medicaid. It's like destroying the village in order to save it. And so the Ryan Republican budget, which went nowhere in the Senate, and they knew it, was not a real effort in passing a budget. It was an ideological blueprint and took it out of the hides of ordinary Americans who have already sacrificed, the middle class and our elderly.
Democratic caller next in Cleveland, Ohio. Is it Bridget?
Hello?
You're on the air, caller.
Yes, I received disability and I am disabled. And I've heard Obama speak, and I feel that he is for the American people. I also have a son that's disabled. And I'm kind of wondering what is going to happen to people that are disabled if they refuse to send out checks. What's going to happen to our children and our families? And what is the president and the government planning on doing about housing and stuff like that if we all become homeless?
Congresswoman.
You know, and I don't want to scare people. We have to make sure that we can send that check to you. I mean, the consequences, as you've said, for you personally, one person, could be devastating. Can you be homeless? No. You know, I don't know your situation in terms of your disability, but it must be very scary right now. So that is why we need you, as the president asked, to communicate with your members of Congress that we need to have a fair and balanced plan. You know, the president asked, can we ask Medicare recipients to sacrifice while corporate jet owners and oil companies get tax breaks? We have to do sensible things so that you do not end up homeless. And guess what? If we do not help you in the way we are right now with your disability check, it's going to be more expensive down the line. You're going to end up in the emergency room, and you will need to be taken care of. You'll be homeless on the street, which is intolerable in the richest country in the world. So we need to make sure that your needs are met with that check, which I'm sure is not huge. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you get it.
There's a story this morning on the National Journal website about websites crashing after the president last night in his speech asked people to reach out to their lawmakers and urge them to compromise. What impact did that have on your website, on communication with your constituents?
Well, I'll tell you, I've been hearing all the time, heavily, hang tough, you know, make sure that we raise that debt ceiling as we have in a perfunctory manner so many times. Don't cut Medicare and Social Security. Those are the things that I hear most about, and I know it's stepped up. And I tell my constituents who know what my position, it helps me to hear from you. Let me know anyway, so that I can say, that's not just my opinion. I'm hearing from my constituents. So I hope, and I think that, you know, you mentioned that the Harry Reid plan. The Harry Reid does not touch the entitlements. I credit the American people as well as the Senate Democrats for that, because they are expressing their views.
That's our topic coming up in just a few minutes here. How to best influence your lawmaker. As a recent study showed that more staffers, more members of Congress are using Facebook and other social media tools. What do you think the best way is to reach out to you? Is it person to person in a town hall meeting, or is it Facebook?
You know, there is a hierarchy, certainly a face-to-face meeting, either in the context of in the office, in the district, or in Washington. You know, it's always but something is always better than nothing. It could be signing a petition, which is perhaps the lowest level, but I would recommend email is very important. You know, when they start loading up the emails, phone calls. If they're shutting down the office phone, that gets noticed when people call in. So there, all the areas of communication, new media, Facebook, tweeting, those are all good ways. Whatever it is, make your voice heard.
And the other way around, vice versa, for you to talk to your constituents. What has been the benefit, if at all, of social media for you?
We use it all. We use Facebook to, you know, we'll put up videos so that people can see what I said directly. We'll tweet. We respond to tweets. We do an email newsletter. And occasionally we still do snail mail, because there's still people out there who want to get that letter. But we use all the the tools available to us to communicate.
Well, that'll be our topic coming up here in a few minutes, talking about a new report out about social media, its impact. And we want to hear from you when we go there to talk about what do you think is the best way to influence your lawmaker. But first, one more phone call for the Congresswoman. Peter is an independent in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Go ahead. Peter,
Hello.
Peter, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Peter.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, first of all, this person illustrates all that is wrong with this country. She illustrates the political class. Okay.
Okay, you know what, Peter, I'm gonna leave it there because we're running out of time, and also you got to turn that television down because you're hearing us in the background and hearing the feedback, and it's confusing you and the viewers. So we'll just have to leave it there. But I want to know from you before we go, your prediction for this. Do you have confidence that the debt ceiling will be raised?
I'm going to say that I believe that it will be raised. The markets certainly seem to have confidence right now. I hope they're communicating to members of Congress. I hope the business community is weighing in. I think that the consequences are so devastating that it's got to be sobering for the majority of members of Congress.
How closely do you watch the markets, and what are you looking for that says investors are not happy?
Well, I wanted to understand from the markets if they're taking this crisis in the Congress seriously. It seems as if they continue essentially to have confidence that we're going to do the right thing, and certainly I'm going to do everything I can to make them right about that. But the business community needs to communicate to the Republicans and the Democrats as well, but the Republicans especially.
Congresswoman Schakowsky, thank you for talking to our viewers. Appreciate it.
Thank you.